Grace and peace from God our Father and our Lord and Savior Christ. Amen. So earlier this week I heard an interview on NPR. They were interviewing an author named Barry Lopez, who just released a book called Horizon. Some of you may be familiar with it. It says the book Horizon is about 6 places, on my page here, 6 places that have helped shape his understanding of the world. 6 places have helped shape his understanding of the world. And it says that this book was years and years and years in writing. He was really wrestling with what it means to live in the world, in foreign countries, in his native country. What does it mean to eat in various countries? What does it mean to share food? What does it mean to have and have not? He also talked about something that helped spur him on eventually to write this. He said the answer was cancer. In 2013, he was diagnosed with an extremely aggressive form of metastatic prostate cancer. And for him, the diagnosis was a lesson in empathy. He said he imagined everybody that he passed had some sort of story in their life and their background, or maybe that day, that would just break your heart. Everybody has a story, he says. And then he says, so I wrote Horizon to try to remember stories, to try to encounter a story that would remind us, because, he says, the Achilles heel of consciousness is that we forget. We forget what we stand for. We forget to maintain good relationships with the people around us. We forget. And so the reason for story in general, the reason for story is to repair the damage that forgetting always does. The story comes along to say, so what about this? Let's look at this another way. And what about living like this? So Barry Lopez, a story to help us not forget. A story to help us not to forget the people in our lives, not to forget those around us. Today's gospel reading, that long gospel reading, but it's an incredible story that Jesus tells. Jesus is eating with sinners and tax collectors, or at least that's what he gets accused of. He's welcoming them, he's eating with them. It's food. And in the midst of that, some Pharisees and some scribes, religious leaders, the people who think of themselves as the holy ones, see Jesus with the unholy ones. And they criticize him. So Jesus tells actually 3 stories, 3 little parables. He tells the first about a frantic shepherd who has 100 sheep and is counting, and all of a sudden can't find one. And Jesus says, which one of you religious leaders wouldn't leave the 99 in the wilderness to go search for the one? And they're probably looking at each other, this guy's crazy. I wouldn't leave 99 to go search for one. But that's part of the story. It's a frantic shepherd. And when he finds that one, he celebrates, he throws a party. And then he tells a story about a frantic woman. Which one of you, having 10 coins and losing one, would not sweep your whole house like this frantic woman does in search of that one lost coin? And when she finds it, she throws a party worth more than the 10 coins put together, just to say, what was lost is now found. So Jesus sets up the story. That's the skeleton. There's going to be somebody frantic. There's going to be something lost. So a man has 2 sons. Which is easier to count, by the way? 100 or 100 sheep, 10 coins, or 2 sons? Maybe 2. 1, 2, right? 1, 2. Easier to count. And maybe you're thinking, gosh, Pastor Dave has 2 children. Maybe you're thinking, I have 2 sons, or 2 grandchildren, or 2 daughters, 2 granddaughters, whatever it might look like. You start thinking about the times when one or the other sibling got into some kind of problem or some kind of mischief, and the times when maybe one didn't. Maybe if you're a school teacher, you start thinking about all the kids that you have. Who gets your attention? Who do you overlook? All those kind of things, the scenarios. If you're a Jewish person in Jesus' day, you might even think a man had 2 sons. The very beginning stories of the Bible. Adam and Eve. A man, Adam, has 2 sons, Cain and Abel. Abel's sacrifice is accepted for whatever reason. Cain gets jealous and kills the younger brother Abel. A little bit later, Abraham and Sarah, they can't have children. So Abraham and a lady named Hagar have a child named Ishmael. Ishmael's growing up in the house, and all of a sudden, Sarah gets pregnant. Abraham and Sarah have Isaac, and Ishmael, the oldest son, gets sent away, banished. You are gone along with Hagar, so we can raise this Isaac son. The younger son has a more acceptable life, perhaps. Or perhaps later on, kids named Esau and Jacob. Esau's the oldest, comes out first. He's red and he's hairy. And his brother Jacob comes out second, and Jacob is smooth and a smooth operator. And the younger brother steals the inheritance from the older brother. He takes it all and runs. Or at least in the Bible days, the inheritance for the older son was somewhere either 2/3 to 7/9, or whatever, you do the math, depending on how many children you have, I guess. 2/3 to 7/9, you get most of it if you're the oldest. So Jacob takes most of it and runs. So if you're telling a story, if you're hearing a story in the Bible days, go with the younger son. Something's going to happen with that younger son. Abel, Isaac, Jacob. So Jesus says a man has two sons. The younger son, there's the problem again, the younger son comes and says, give me my share of the inheritance. Whether that's 1/3 or 2/9, whatever the math is. Jesus tells a story and says that the man, the crazy father, divides. We don't know if it's 50-50 or back to that mathematical mess. But he says, okay, take it. And the son, a couple days later, has turned over whatever he has received, some land, some crops, some animals, some clothes, whatever. It sounds like he turns it over into cash. And he takes it and he leaves and goes to a faraway country. Goes to a faraway country. So you know the story. The first problem is that he leaves home. The second thing is, verse 13 in your bulletins, it says that he, twice the word is, he squandered and dissolute. It's the same word both times. It's asotos, or at least that's the verb. In other words, it's without health, or without saving, or without morals. It can be any of that. Sotos, or asotos. Sotos is where we get a word that means salvation. And soteriology is a study of salvation. He does it without saving anything. He does it. He just goes and he spends and he loses what he has. So he's left home and now he's squandered, or he is without savings, and he's in a foreign country and he doesn't speak the language. And all of a sudden a severe famine shows up. Kind of like the drought in Nebraska I was talking about a while ago. I mean the flooding in Nebraska going on. And what happens to our Lutheran brothers and sisters and all our other brothers and sisters in Nebraska when these huge floods come up and it wipes out their farmland and livestock by the millions are destroyed? Gosh, what happens? And then this young man, he gets a job. Good for him, he gets a job. But it's with a pig farm. He is with the lowest of the low. He's starving, but he can't eat the pig food because good Jews don't mess with pigs or pig food, but he has to at least feed them. And it says he would gladly eat anything, but no one would give him anything. So where are you in the story? Have you ever wandered away from home? Have you ever been asotos, without health, or without saving? Or maybe even that means without holiness. Have you ever been outside or someone accused you of being unholy? Have you ever been part of a famine or a drought or a flood? Have you ever almost starved to death? Or have you ever seen someone really hungry and either shared your food or not shared your food? Where are you in that story? The young man hits rock bottom. The young man has to file for bankruptcy. All the different problems that is existing in his new country. And then he thinks to himself, I still have a father. I guess he's still alive. I can go back home. I can get a job with him. He's still this kid who's maybe conniving. He's still this kid who wants something from his daddy, even though his daddy has already written him the check and sent him away. So he goes home. He works on a confession, but he doesn't get the whole confession out before his daddy. The story says that his daddy's sitting on the front porch. waiting, watching for days, for months, for years with his binoculars, so occupied with looking. But the daddy is not a frantic shepherd or a frantic housewoman looking for a sheep or a coin. The dad's just sitting there looking, but he's very occupied. He's pretty self-absorbed in where the son is. And when he sees him, what? He comes running to him. Yes, we know the story. He comes running to him. And he says, "Son, welcome back." He hugs him. He kisses him. Kiss, a sign of forgiveness. We'll share the peace in a little bit, but sometimes it's the kiss of peace or just a handshake or a hug, but it's part of forgiveness. He kisses him, it's forgiveness, and then he calls slaves and servants. Wow, this man has a lot of stuff, doesn't he? We hadn't heard about slaves until now. He calls us slaves and servants. Bring some stuff over. Bring the robe, you know, the one with the monogrammed, the monogram on it from the bathroom, the royal robe, basically. Bring that one over. And the ring, get the ring, the signet ring, which means that now he's going to be stamping all our family checks. And not just the ring, but get the sandals for his feet. And servants, you put the sandals on his feet because it symbolizes that you bow down now to this son. This is an absurd story. This son is getting way too much. Maybe you felt like that and you've heard the songs about the prodigal son and you've come home and running home to God. And this is how God is, but at the same time, this is a pretty absurd story. And then the music starts. The dad says, "Let's have a party. Let's have a party. Let's call a caterer. Let's call the band." Hours, maybe even days go by. They're getting everything ready. It's taking a while. It takes a while to roast a pig, doesn't it? Or a fatted calf, even bigger. It takes a long time. And they're having a party. They're singing for "He's a Jolly Good Fellow," for "He's a Jolly Good Fellow." Welcome home. This son of mine. This is fantastic. What a great story. Right? Is it the end I'm in? A man had how many sons? Maybe it's a story about the man forgetting to count. Because right now, all the celebration, all the stories about the one son. Where's the other son? He ain't been invited to the party. Things have been going on. Servants have come. The band is playing. Where is the son? The father hasn't gone to get the other son. There's something wrong. This is not necessarily a story of God or a frantic house woman or a frantic shepherd. Jesus is telling a story, I think, like Barry Lopez was saying, so that we don't forget our relationships, because it seems like this father has forgotten one relationship. He was so preoccupied with the other relationship looking. Jesus is telling a story to the Pharisees and to the scribes saying, don't forget these people that God created. Don't forget. Cain killed Abel, and Abel can never come back, and Cain can never be reconciled to his brother. Am I my brother's keeper? But also don't forget that Ishmael and Isaac did come back together. When Abraham died, they both got together at their father's grave. And at least there is hope, maybe still today, for children of Ishmael and children of Isaac, for some type of peace between enmity. Or Jacob and Esau. Jacob, that conniving, smooth operator. I mean, he went a far way away. He had 12 sons and one daughter and a whole bunch of wives and others, and he had a bunch of stuff because he stole his birthright. But one day, he got in a wrestling match with some entity, possibly God. He came away with a limp. He was forever changed, and his name was no longer Jacob but Israel. And he came across a river. He came changed across a river to look for Esau. And Esau was a bit scared, and Esau sent an army. But they come and they pass by the army, and Jacob and Esau come together, and they embrace, and they hug, and they kiss, and there is forgiveness. Jesus tells a story about two sons. One son may have been forgotten. One son may have been lost. But the question Jesus leaves for all is, what will happen? Will the older son ever come into the party and participate in the feast? Will the younger son share anything with the older son? What will happen with the father? Will they be reconciled to the father? Will they forgive the father or not? And the question then goes back to us. Who in our families have we forgotten to count? Who do we need to be reconciled with? What about in our classrooms or our schools or our community? Who do we overlook? Who do we discount? Who do we fail to count? How do we invite others to the party? All I know is that eventually, somewhere in this big story that Jesus tells, there's this fatted calf that gets killed. There's this fatted calf that gets slaughtered. It's a symbol of sin and forgiveness. It's a symbol of hope and lavishness. It's a symbol of grace. And maybe in the Gospel of Luke, that fatted calf has some kind of connection to the Lamb of God. But how will you take that story and make it your own today? How will you walk or take the next step into reconciliation or life or forgiveness or mercy? How will you start counting differently? Amen.